Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching The Voice of the Global South on DD India, your weekly guide to everything that's happening in Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Asia and Oceania. Our cover story this week is about Bangladesh. Now, Bangladesh is the world's 7th most populous country. It has the 4th largest Muslim population in the world. Bangladesh has a booming textile and garment manufacturing industry. Chances are that the branded shirt or dress you're wearing now was made in Bangladesh. But that's not the reason why we are featuring Bangladesh this week. Bangladesh is in the news because of protests sweeping the country. Protesters, mostly students, are calling for reform of a quota system that reserves more than half of highly sought-after government jobs for descendants of veterans of the 1971 War of Independence, women and backward areas. In South Asia, it's called quota or reservation. In some other parts of the world, it is known as equal opportunity, affirmative action, or positive discrimination. Now, the protests are ongoing. Police fired rubber bullets, hurled sound grenades, and lobbed tear gas canisters to scatter protesters who blocked railway tracks and major roads. French news agency AFP reported that the death toll had risen to 105. But some other news agencies cited a lower number of deaths.
At least 19 people have been killed in the protest in Bangladesh. 13 of them died on 18th July, which saw the highest death toll in a single day so far. Protesters are demanding that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government ends a 30% quota for the families of people who fought in the 1971 War of Independence from Pakistan. Since 14 July, her party supporters have gathered and confronted the demonstrators who had blocked major thoroughfares in Dhaka. On 16 July, armed cadre of Bangladesh's ruling Awami League party, along with its student wing, took to the streets of Dhaka to counter the protesters. Brandishing sticks, bats, helmets and even handguns, the cadre labelled the protesters as traitors, while confrontations occurred in multiple locations in capital Dhaka and elsewhere in the country. Not all the dead were students. A bus driver and a rickshaw puller were among the dead. The bus driver was brought to a hospital with a bullet wound to his chest. Protest intensified after Prime Minister refused to meet the students' demands, citing ongoing court proceedings. The protests are the first significant challenge to Prime Minister Hasina's government since she won a 4th straight term in an election held in January that was boycotted by the main opposition.
All right, I want you, the viewer, to understand the issues at hand better. Take a look at Bangladesh's reservation policy over the years. Now, we start in 1972 when Bangladesh started its reservation policy just 1 year after its independence in 1971. 80% seats were reserved for certain categories, 20% were to be filled on merit. Now, those 80% comprise 30% seats for freedom fighters, 10% for war-affected women, and 40% for people from backward districts or backward areas. In 1976, the government decided to bring down the reservation from 80 to 60%. How? By reducing the number of percentage of quota for backward districts from 40 to 20%. So 60% reserved, 40% to be filled on merit. In 1985, the government further reduced reservation from 60% to 55%. And how did they do it? By bringing three changes. One, the 10% reservation for war-affected women was extended to include all women, not just war-affected women. The quota for backward districts was reduced further from 20% to 10%, and a new 5% quota was started for indigenous communities or ethnic minorities. So 55% reserved, 45% on merit. Then two things happened. In 1997, children of freedom fighters were brought under the ambit of reservation. And in 2010, grandchildren of those veterans were also given the benefit of reservation. And last but not the least, in 2012, the reservation was increased marginally to 56%. How? By introducing a 1% quota for persons with disabilities. That's how things look even today as we speak. Now, what you all should know is that anti-quota protests are not new to Bangladesh. They've taken place in the past as well. For example, in 2018, like now they're happening now in 2024. But here, then, like now, the protests started in the Shahbag area of Dhaka before spreading to other areas of the country. First, take a look at what happened in 2018, and then we'll talk about 2024. In January 18, a petition was filed in the Dhaka High Court seeking re-evaluation of quota policy. In March that year, Dhaka High Court rejected the petition. Protests broke out in April that year, and in October, the government abolished or scrapped the quota for families of freedom fighters. Now, coming to 2024, on 5th June this year, the Dhaka High Court ruled that the 2018 decision taken by the government to abolish the quota was illegal and reinstated the quota. Subsequently, the government moved the country's top court against the High Court ruling. On 1st July, protests broke out. And on the 4th of July, the Bangladesh Supreme Court upheld the High Court ruling. On the 11th, the Supreme Court suspended the High Court ruling pending a hearing on the government's appeal on 7th August. Now, not one to give in easily, Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had a word or two for the protesters. A combative Hasina had this to say to the protesters. Here's the exact quote. Why do they have so much resentment against the freedom fighters? If the grandchildren of freedom fighters don't get quota benefits, should the grandchildren of Razakars get the benefit? Not to be outdone, the protesting students retorted by raising these slogans. Quota na medha, 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 meaning not quota but talent, talent, talent. Also, chaite gelam odhikar, hoy gelam Razakar, meaning I went asking for my rights but was branded a Razakar. Now, Razakar is a Persian word meaning volunteer, but in Bangladesh it's a pejorative term that stands for traitor. It's used for those accused of collaborating with Pakistan's army in 1971 to betray the country. The Razakar was a paramilitary force formed by Pakistan to commit war crimes including massacring civilians, looting and rape. The Bangladesh government brands all collaborators of Pakistani forces as Razakar. Now, the question is, are there strong, compelling arguments for and against quotas in Bangladesh? The short answer is yes. The Dhaka High Court said, and I quote, "The freedom fighters are pride of our nation. Thus, we are of the view that during the period of August 1575 to 1996, the freedom fighters, their children and grandchildren have been suffering socially, economically and politically, which makes them one of the most backward sections of the citizen of this country," unquote. There are compelling arguments to be made against quotas too. First of all, protesters argue that a problem arises when freedom fighters, quota holders use it multiple times. First, at the time of university admission, and second, when applying for coveted government jobs. And second of all, Bangladesh is facing high youth unemployment. That, coupled with stagnant job growth in private sector, makes a government job with a regular source of income that much more desirable to the youths. Now, college libraries are filled with young graduates cramming for the civil service examination, vying for scarce government jobs that promise job security, good income and prestige. In last year's recruitment test, some 346,000 candidates competed for just 3,300 jobs. Young people make up more than a quarter of the country's population. Now picture this. 32 million people in the country out of a population of 170 million are not in work or education. That is, 1 in every 5 Bangladeshi between 15 and 24 years of old is either out of work or education or both. This according to official statistics from 2023. Now, university graduates face higher rates of unemployment than their less educated peers. About 650,000 graduates are among the more than 2 million young people entering the job market every year. That's not all. Blue-collar jobs are also harder to come by. Textile and garment sectors are Bangladesh's biggest employers. Exports have jumped fourfold to $40 billion since 2008, but employment across private sector jobs has stagnated. Now, Bangladesh's economy, once among the world's fastest growing, has stagnated. Inflation hovers around 10% and dollar reserves are shrinking by the day. Now, are quotas unique to Bangladesh? Certainly not. There are many examples from the global south of countries reserving a certain percentage of education and jobs. India, for instance, has 59.5% reservation. Nepal has 45% reservation. South Africa has an Employment Equity Act to promote diversity and equality in the workplace. It applies to companies employing more than 50 people. So to conclude, there are no easy answers to the vexed problem. So, should merit be sacrificed at the altar of positive discrimination? Or is a level playing field must for the sake of equality and equal opportunity? What do you think? Let us know. The question we are asking is this: are Bangladesh anti-quota protests justified? Yes or no? I repeat, are Bangladesh anti-quota protests justified? Yes or no? You can post your replies on our social media handles at Facebook, X and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. So that was all about Bangladesh. Moving to Africa now, where Nigeria is grappling with a cholera outbreak. More than 100 people have died already. Cholera spreads because of lack of access to clean water. Experts warn that improving clean water access and sanitation are absolutely vital to combating the disease. Ajay Mangut reports.
Hawa Dauda is fetching water for home use. She says the borehole in her community on the outskirts of Abuja cannot adequately serve nearly 6,000 residents.
We use the water from the river for our cooking and drinking needs. Bottled and sachet water is now expensive.
According to the Nigerian Institute of Water Engineers, more than 170 million Nigerians lack access to clean water. This exposes them to illnesses such as cholera, which the country is currently struggling with. Cholera is an acute diarrheal infection caused by drinking water or eating food that has been contaminated.
Nigeria Center for Disease Control says over 3,000 suspected cases of cholera have been recorded in more than 30 states of the country in 2024, with deaths exceeding 100.
Health experts warn the limited availability of clean water and sanitation hygiene services not only increases the risk of cholera infections, but also complicates the recovery process.
They are at higher risk of contracting cholera, that's one, and they are at higher risk of not recovering as quickly as they would, because one of the mainstay of treatments of managing cholera cases is oral rehydration.
Analysts suggest the government gives priority to providing clean water and sanitation hygiene to prevent future outbreaks.
The government needs to improve water, sanitation and hygiene facilities across the country especially in hard-to-reach communities, in underserved communities, communities that can't do anything about it themselves.
Last month, Nigeria's Center for Disease Control set up an emergency cholera operations center to enhance case management, surveillance, diagnostic capacity and public awareness. In April, Nigeria sought funding from the World Bank to improve water and sanitation. The Ministry of Water Resources is also working with state governments to enhance the capacity of river basins. As Hawa carries her bowl of water home, she hopes the government's promises will lead to better access to clean water soon. Ajek Mangut in Abuja, reporting for DD India.
Right, and now to our next segment, Did You Know? Did you know that India's currency, the rupee, was the official currency in parts of Asia and Africa in the 50s and 60s? The Indian rupee was an official currency of Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, Malaysia, Kenya, Uganda, the Seychelles and Mauritius, among others. The Gulf rupee was the official currency of some of these countries between 1959 and 1970. Those banknotes were withdrawn over a period of time and ceased to be used around 1970 when the Gulf states issued their own currencies. Now, today, rupee is the name given to the official currency of Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan and Mauritius. Indonesia called it rupiah and it's called rufiah in the Maldives. In more news from Africa, Paul Kagame has been re-elected as Rwanda's president. He won 99.18% of votes in the 15th July election. It further extends his nearly 25-year rule. Kagame came to power in 2000 and after a 2015 amendment to the country's constitution, Kagame could well rule until 2034. Kirat Chawla has more.
Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has achieved a monumental victory in Monday's elections, securing an astonishing 99.18% of the vote, according to the National Electoral Commission.
You can't fake unity, you can't fake excitement.
This marks yet another overwhelming win for Kagame, who has consistently received similar majorities in past elections. This victory extends Kagame's nearly quarter-century hold on the presidency as he continues into his fourth term. Kagame first assumed office in 2000 and has maintained his grip on power through successive elections.
We are all gathered here today because we share one vision, and that is what unites us as the people of Rwanda. And we are going to build our nation together without leaving anyone behind.
Kagame's enduring popularity among supporters is often attributed to the stability and economic growth Rwanda has experienced under his rule. However, critics argue that Kagame's victories are bolstered by his authoritarian governance. The Electoral Commission's decision to bar several candidates, including Kagame's most vocal critics, has further fueled allegations of restricted political space. In this election, only two candidates were allowed to contest against Kagame: Frank Habineza from the Democratic Green Party and independent Philip M. Paimana. Both candidates received less than 1% of the vote, marking a significant drop from their performance in the 2017 election. Their defeat highlights the challenges faced by opposition figures in a political landscape tightly controlled by Kagame's administration. President Kagame's re-election underscores his continued dominance in Rwanda's politics, reflecting both his widespread support and the limited opportunities for opposition. While his leadership has been praised for Rwanda's recovery and development post-genocide, ongoing concerns about human rights abuses and political repression persist. As Kagame embarks on another term, Rwanda faces the dual realities of further stability and ongoing international scrutiny.
And on to our next segment. Our newsmaker this week is Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. He is the Crown Prince of Dubai. The 41-year-old has been appointed as Defense Minister of the United Arab Emirates. Sheikh Hamdan, who has served as Dubai's Crown Prince since 2008, was also named as one of the UAE's Deputy Prime Ministers. Sheikh Hamdan, who goes by the nickname Fazza, is a popular member of Dubai's ruling family. He has 16.4 million followers on Instagram. Sheikh Hamdan took the oath along with other newly appointed ministers in a ceremony held in Abu Dhabi. And now we bring to you a heartwarming story of grit and determination in the face of adversity. It's about how two women are rebuilding their lives in war-torn Iraq. This is the story of Saja Mehdi Abdul Rasul and Joanne Jamil of Basra, a city in southern Iraq.
In the bustling, resilient city of Basra, two remarkable women have defied the odds and societal expectations to achieve economic independence. Saja Mehdi Abdul Rasul and Joanne Jamil are shining examples of perseverance and innovation in a challenging environment. When Saja Mehdi Abdul Rasul's husband was killed by Islamic State militants, she found herself in desperate need of a job to provide for her two children. Starting from scratch, she took a job at a laundry shop.
Everything is difficult in the beginning. Suddenly I found myself with all the responsibilities. I'm the mother and the father. I have to take care of schools and I have to raise the children, so everything was difficult. The separation was difficult. It was not easy.
Despite the immense challenges, Abdul Rasul quickly learned the ins and outs of running the business. Now, she operates her own successful laundry shop, an inspiring testament to her resilience and determination. Joanne Jamil, another trailblazing woman in Basra, faced significant societal resistance when she decided to open her own cafe. Overcoming rejection from her own family, friends and society, Jamil established Joanne's Cafe, a safe and welcoming space for women.
I had the idea since 2019. It was difficult in Basra to have a woman open a cafe. People believe that a cafe means young men, shishas and so on, not a family place for a woman to open. It was difficult. I found rejection from my family, from society and from friends. No one encouraged me. I then started explaining to them that the cafe can be a simple place with few tables, not a large place, just a place with coffee, pastries, sweets and tasty items. It is a rest stop for you to complete your work, or if you want to study, you can find a quiet place to study in.
Her cafe serves as a community hub where people can enjoy coffee, pastries and a sense of normalcy. The journey of these women is set against the backdrop of Iraq's tumultuous history. The status of women in Iraq has been profoundly affected by decades of conflict, including the war with Iran in the 1980s, the Gulf War in 1991, the US invasion in 2003, and the brutal fight against ISIS. Iraqi women have faced immense hardships, with hundreds of thousands widowed and left as primary breadwinners for their families. Despite these challenges, Iraqi women have continued to fight for their rights. Women's rights organizations in Iraq work tirelessly to promote improvements in education, the workplace, and the legal system, while also combating abusive practices such as honor killings and forced marriages. The protest movement of 2019 and 2020 has further mobilized a younger generation of women who are determined to see change. In a pursuit of economic independence, these women are reshaping the narrative, proving that progress and empowerment are possible even in the most challenging of circumstances. It is clear that the strength and determination of the Iraqi women will be the cornerstone of a more just and prosperous society.
Before we close, take a quick look at some events scheduled for next week. Now, Laos's capital Vientiane will host foreign ministers of ASEAN and East Asia Summit from 21st July. Palestinian leaders from Fatah and Hamas groups will continue reconciliation talks in China's capital Beijing on 21st July. India will present its national budget on 23rd July. Ghana's finance minister will present the country's mid-year budget on 23rd July. Gambia will hold the third and final reading of a bill to end a ban on female genital mutilation on 24th July. Thailand's Constitutional Court will hear a case seeking the dismissal of Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin on 24th July. And last but not the least, Summer Olympic Games will begin in Paris on 26th of July. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Voice of the Global South. But news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.